Welcome to episode 31 of Implementation Stories. I am Usha. I drive community and partner initiatives at Rocket Lane. Today, before any of that, Preflight, for those of you who do not know, Preflight is a community of customer onboarding, implementations, and other value delivery professionals and leaders. We host multiple knowledge sharing sessions like this one, and we host multiple leaders and experts in the space to talk about different topics and challenges in the domain, right? Today we are going to be talking about maximizing impact with lean implementation teams. And today, it's my absolute honor to introduce to you Jenn Brantmier, who's the SVP of Client Ops and Delivery at Hapi. I'll just bring Jen on stage now. Hey, Jen.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
It's great to have you here. Folks, while we get started, can you just tell us? I see that some of you have told us where you're joining in from. I see Saurav from WordFix and Stephanie from Indianapolis. And could you please tell us where you're joining in from? And for Jen to have context of who has joined in for the session today, could you also tell us what you're doing currently and what your biggest challenge has been? That would be really helpful. We want the session to be very community centric. Just like you, please post your questions on the Q&A section, and we'll take them up as we go through the session. Without any further ado, Jen, thank you so much for doing this session with us today. Could you, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and what has gotten you so far?
Of course. So my name is Jenn Brantmier. I'm the SVP of Client Operations at a company called Hapi Data Travel, and we are in the hospitality technology space. We have several different types of work that we do. We work with several big hotel partners to power some of their background innovations that they are rolling out to their properties, and the challenges that they deal with in terms of premise-based systems and communicating through clouds. We help with integrations on that side. That's very custom and bespoke work that we do. We also have several apps on the Salesforce App Exchange. We have one that is focused on Sales Cloud. It's called Happy Guest for Sales Cloud. We have Happy Guest for Marketing Cloud, Happy Guest Analytics, and we just launched our fourth app called the Happy Focus app. Our main focus is bringing in property management system data into Sales Cloud for our hotelier partners. And then we activate the integrations and automations between Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud so we can send out transactional emails for things like your email confirmation, cancellation, modification, pre-stay, etc. And we set up marketing campaigns and things like that for our hotelier partners. Prior to this, I worked at a startup in the POS, more the restaurateur side of the space. I was the director of onboarding there. We worked through all kinds of different changes and challenges. I've been in implementations for a really, really long time, since 2005. The original rollout of the Opera property management system into IHG's hotel. Back then, I think they were at like 4,000 hotels. So I worked on that rollout. So I got my start in that like enterprise level volume implementations, which is very different than working with, a small brand that doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure behind them that like a company like IHG would. Or I also worked with most of the brands throughout my career, working at Micros, Oracle. I also worked at Shiji as a project manager and implementation manager there. So I've been in the space for a while, hot minute.
Amazing journey, Jen. Like I'm every time you tell me about this, and then every time I see your LinkedIn profile, I'm like, yes, Jen is the right person to talk about this. And people should probably ask you. Like, I see so many people in the community running very lean implementation teams, and they have a lot of questions about what we're going to talk about today. Um, So my next question is, can you tell us a little bit about how post sales org is structured at Happy, and then a little bit about the scope of the client ops and delivery team.
Okay, so a post sales org in our current organization. So we're in the process actually of making some really big changes to our overall company structure, where we have learned throughout the time that we want to improve the communications between sales and implementations always, right? That is always the sales team. They build the relationships. They learn so much about the hoteliers, and bringing that into implementations it is literally what we do, and we have to do, right? We have to pick up all of those nuanced deliverables and requirements that come through conversation. And as part of that, we have implemented a role of technical account manager, that they join in the sales process when we're pretty confident that the deal is going to come to fruition, right? And then they start talking through more of the technical components and delivery items that the hotelier would want to include as part of their overall plan, right? So from there, the delivery team, myself and my team, I have several different kinds of consultants that report as part of the delivery organization. At Happy, client delivery is everything from we do consulting work for hoteliers if people need help, right? For any different kinds of things like systems and things like that. So we do have some consulting that we do for our hotelier partners. We also plan the overall implementation, right? So you purchase the software, now we're going to install it for you. Training and all of that is part of my organization. We have folks that specialize in connecting our platform to the external systems. We have consultants that specialize in Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud, and then our additional integration partners. We also provide support. So when you don't know what to do, you call us and we will help you. Or on the off chance that something breaks, break fix support is also part of our organization. Of course, as the leader of those organizations, I'm the point of escalation. I work to build the relationships with our hotelier partners post-implementation, and I try to support my team as best I can throughout the overall process.
Understood. And one follow-up question I have for this is, where does success come in here across the org? Which is there like a handover that happens to the CS team? Is there a CS team or
no? So we don't have a small team, right? So we are very small. We are a very small company, but our client base is growing just like everybody's. So the success aspect of it is handled through still my organization, the post live support. So we function as two sides. So we do proactive, which to a lot of folks that would be considered success, right? You're reaching out to the hoteliers and you're saying, like, how are you doing? What are you doing with your system? What do you want to try? Like, what's next? Getting that aspect up and running, and then helping them with their metrics. So a lot of times, like, it's up to the hotelier how much they want to share with us in terms of their deliverability and things like that. If their deliverabilities are low, which is unusual in Salesforce, right? They tend to have very high deliverabilities. We will help them with that. We have one hotel partner that, for whatever reason, they have really struggled with a very specific ISP, and we're helping them through that to try to work with actually the ISP. Salesforce is helping them resolve that issue. So we will do a lot for our hoteliers as part of our success aspect of it. It doesn't always look the same. Every hotelier we always make the joke that every hotel is exactly the same and that they are 100% different. And it doesn't matter if it's a major brand. Different cities have different rules, right? And that makes a different guest. It makes a different experience. It means different configuration elements and all of that. So success is part of my organization as well. And it's one area that we're working to So we're building out that focus more over the next 6 months with the implementation of the new system. So that's a big part of it.
Understood. But when you say that hotels, everything is same, but like I remember people telling me that everything is the same, but they're all different.
Mhm.
So I'm sure a lot of people who are catering to more traditional industries like hospitality would very much relate to that statement. So, for the benefit of our audience, can you define what we mean by lean teams, lean implementation teams?
So, and that was one of the, I was like, we're not lean like lean manufacturing, right? Like we're not that kind of lean. In our case, we are just simply talking that we have a very small team, and everybody has multiple skills, and they oftentimes wear multiple hats. And so it's finding that balance for my team and not, and it's tough, like we are imperfect, right? But finding that balance of the person who set up the system is also probably the person that's going to help you in the long run with support and success. So we have worked to try to like make that more, everybody has like the thing that they're really good at, so we leverage that, right? We have folks that are extremely talented in Sales Cloud, so they're the ones that set up, they're the ones that are going to answer questions. So like if a hotelier wants to set up a different kind of calculation, our team, like that person is going to consult and tell them what they can do, and then they will help them set that up. And then as they go through the process and they go live and they have questions, that person is still going to be there to answer those questions. So it's when we're tiny, but we also leverage that skill set to try to build those relationships too, and have continuity of service, of course.
Understood. And when you're talking about lean teams, what is, because when we say lean, that also goes to say that hey, we just started with say large client rollouts, and we have resources that will exactly fit the requirements for that, and we cannot afford to get it wrong. What would you say are some things that uh, the planning cannot be wrong, or what are some things that you absolutely cannot get wrong with lean implementation teams and larger rollouts like you do with your customers?
So I think as much as I want to say it's different, it's not, right? In the end, being very clear about what the client's expectations are is 100% it's the same for everybody. Any implementation, it has to be exactly the same. Like you have to make sure those requirements are well documented. And I think that for a small team, it becomes so much more critical simply because when something goes wrong, and they do, right? Like we are all imperfect. We're humans. We are deeply flawed and imperfect, right? So when something does go wrong, if it's a small team, the impact is felt so much greater because that means that other items that are dependent on it are going to be shifted off and will then be off target. Or if we get things done early, then we can move things on and then we're able to deliver faster. But the impact when things are not well documented or not well understood, is so much greater. So for us as a small team, that has become such the focus because it's too impactful when we don't do a good job on the requirements gathering. And one of the things we ran into recently is, nobody thought to ask the question, right? Sometimes you just don't think about it. You don't think that they are running on a server that's 20 years old. You don't think about that because that is unusual, right? So it's things like that then do cause us to have to pause, regroup, and reshuffle. And we've gotten quite adept at that because we are small. We do communicate quite well. So that is, I know it's the measure twice, cut once. Like that adage exists for this reason, because if you do a good job up front, take the little bit more time to plan, I think that is how you end up being more successful in the long run. And I know that that's not always what people want to hear, right? A lot of times our customers, they bought this new thing and they want to start using it tomorrow. And that is great. And I would love for you to be able to use it tomorrow. but let's make sure we know what we're using first. And that is when we tend to run into a little bit more of a challenge, is when folks don't want to spend the time planning. Then we have to coach them into it and help them understand. So it's one of the things that we work on as well.
Understood. And when you spoke about communication being very important in small teams. So
Mm-hmm.
now, are there any other challenges that you are faced with as a small implementation team?
Well, I think one of the, and I don't know if we'll get into it more later, but one of the items that we run into is that knowledge sharing can be really difficult, and it's not intentional, right? Like nobody's like there's none of that kind of stuff, but that knowledge share can be really difficult. Where not only are we small, we're also 100% remote. We have some pods that we've built, so we do have some. There's a few folks here in Baltimore that we can work together with. There's a few folks in Chicago, Florida, and we have some out west too. And then we have folks in the Ukraine, and we have folks that are in India that we work with, and we have a few folks that are in Germany. So like we really do capture the whole globe, and sometimes things like that knowledge share can be very like challenging. We literally speak different languages sometimes, which those are always the most fun conversations to have when when you get to that moment, you're like, oh yes, this is what we all mean. That's great. But the knowledge share is big. And we are like, so we just are implementing the EOS method in the company. As I said earlier, we're making major organizational shifts. And one of the focuses for us for the next quarter is simply like improving the knowledge share between product and implementations and sales and implementation. So ops, we're always in the middle of everybody, right? So it's that knowledge transfer, and that like what that brings is more accountability for folks and more like empowerment, right? If you know that this is the thing that you are great at and this is what you're supposed to do, these are the steps that you do it, you build confidence, and then your like productivity, you feel better about the work that you're doing, your clients feel better about the work that you're doing, and everybody is much, much, much happier in the long run when you can build that knowledge transfer. And we have several different tools that we use, just like everybody. We use Slack, unsurprisingly, at Development House that does use Slack and Jira, right? Like Slack, Jira, and Confluence were primary tools. We are recently implementing a new onboarding system that is going to replace Jira for some folks, not the Dev House, but some folks to improve that knowledge share there too.
Understood. And does communication happen on across these tools? And Jira is for internal communication, and does Slack is Slack what you use for external communication, or is it?
So yes, and we have okay. So internally, the dev teams primarily, and like our internal teams, were primarily using Jira for like if there's a requirement like communication regarding like the build during that configuration phase. We use Slack as well, of course, for that's more of the non-dev folks. So like more of the project team, they'll provide their updates. We have a Slack channel for every single one of our customers for internal communications that we make the sales team stay with us in the Slack channels for them to always be there and be informed if there's a question, or if, hey, this thing came up, did you ever talk about this? So we do use Slack for those kinds of communications. We try not to use Slack with our external customers as much, simply because Slack has that tendency to create that feeling of immediacy. And if our customers reach out to us via Slack, they're expecting that like immediate response. And as a small team, that's not always the case. Also, we can't track things in Slack, right? Like you can't track things. We need our team members, and it's not our team members, but our hotelier partners. We do have them use, we have a customer portal for tickets for support. We use Service Cloud. Again, we're a Salesforce partner, so we use Service Cloud. So we have a portal that hoteliers can go to, open tickets, And that becomes important for things like access, right? Like we need to confirm that you are giving us access to your system. We also then are able to track and capture metrics. If we're seeing the same issue come up for multiple customers, then maybe it is training, maybe we're setting something up, maybe there's a learning experience, or maybe our vendor partner changed the configuration setting and they didn't tell us. Like it happens, right? Especially when you have like dozens and dozens of vendor partners that you work with, they make changes. Like we're all human, and we sometimes there's folks that make a change and didn't think, like you just forgot, right? Like humans. So we try not to use Slack for our external hotelier partners, because we don't want them to feel like we're not listening if we don't respond to them right away when we really do need that ticket. There are exceptions, of course. We did a rollout and an activation a few months back where the cutover started at like 8 a.m. in the Ukraine, and it ended at 10 p.m. in California. So like literally the entire globe was part of the conversion, which is pretty cool. But our customers were there. Was like we had a combined Slack channel. There were multiple vendors. We were the hub of the wheel. There were multiple vendors that we were also coordinating with. So we did have the Slack channel with our customers for that, right? Like otherwise it would be so much harder if we're asking them to test and things like that. So in those cases, we also have like a bridge open so people can like reach out and talk to folks right away. So we make exceptions when it's like you need to. You can't be so hard and fast about those kind of choices, but that's our goal. And then our new system that we're implementing, we have started rolling out and inviting a few of our customers in. We wanted to go a little bit slow to give folks an opportunity for learning purposes, but also like if we're hearing feedback from customers like this part's a little bit confusing, can you change this, that, the other? I'd rather do that on a smaller scale than have my whole portfolio in this new tool and everybody complains about it, then they don't want to use it, right? Like I have to be a little bit careful, and we want to make sure that adoption is high. But the new tool allows us to talk with our customers in an individual task, and that's really clutch. We're really excited about that.
Interesting that you said it was in fact very insightful when you said Slack creates this notion of urgency and not everything has to go out in Slack. I think that's very, very, like, I agree with that statement 100%. I do not think people should create a notion of urgency for every issue that the customer has. But as a follow-up question to all of this, when we are talking about communication, I see the bigger picture, and I can tell you that it's important that everyone is on the same page about communication and about where we are going or where the implementation is going. So who's responsible to make sure, is there someone in the team who's responsible for making sure that everyone is on the same page? Is there a project manager? Is there somebody who oversees all of this?
Yep. So ultimately, it's my team, it's my responsibility to ensure that our projects and our team is communicating in the way that I have coached them to and the way that we want them to, right, as a team and company. However, to that end, I cannot be in all places at once, right? So I have an excellent team of project managers and also our consultants. So as an example, when we get a new project, our project managers are the first person, like they're the ones that go through, they'll review the SOW. I've already read it by this point. I'm part of the sales process, right? So our project managers will review the SOW. They understand that they are responsible for the individual delivery of that project. It is theirs, and they're empowered to make decisions, make exceptions, hold the line when we need to. They have that accountability. Do they always use it? Not necessarily. Do they come to me and there's directors too, right? So I have 2 directors and then the project managers. So we have 3 sort of levels. They they know that they can ask. We don't ever say something like, don't ask me that. Like, that would be absolutely terrible. So that's not our motto at all. They know that, but they know that they can ask and they know that they can answer. We encourage them to partner with the Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud consultants when we are doing those kind of implementations, to trust your SME, right? I don't expect the project managers to know every single thing about every single product. We have several. So we empower them to partner with their SMEs and trust their SMEs. So the project managers are the ones that are responsible for driving the delivery, which includes communication. So they're the ones that are following up with our hoteliers. Obviously, we have some automation now that we're able to do that with, to help save time for the project managers. They also are the ones that set the tone as far as if we do need to have a Slack channel with an external vendor partner, they absolutely are able to make that choice. Like, I would never tell somebody, no, we shouldn't do that. Like, want to make sure that it's the right choice. And if there's something that might be more appropriate in that scenario, but we want to empower them to make those choices too.
Understood. I agree with what you said about open communication. I think it's very difficult to get right, especially when I think it's a culture thing, right? The top down or the bottom up approach is a very culture thing. And I think it's great that you have this approach to project management. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is with lean teams, it's essential that the right people are assigned, the right resources are assigned to the right tasks. So, and how do you get this right? How do you make sure that the right people are doing the right job? Because there's a bunch of things across a project, say, that needs attention.
Yep.
How do you get this right?
So one of the things, and EOS, the right person, right seat, is like a constant conversation that you have, because you're supposed to be always thinking about improving, growing, changing, etc. So I mentioned that, we talked about that a little bit earlier, right person, right seat. My team right now is doing a lot of different things, and it's not always that I would want them, right? Like, I certainly don't want people to be overtasked. That's not what I'm saying. But there are times where we have an opportunity to do something that's not 100% project related, right? Like, we have a new piece of documentation, or we have maybe somebody wants to do a class on project management, as an example, or things like that. So when we talk about right person, right seat, we're talking about people that when they are talking about what they do every day, they talk about the things that they like doing and the things they don't like doing. And we try to find folks that want to do more, not necessarily outside of, like I said, not outside, not overtime, not like that, but they want to learn more and be part of the organization more than just the task in front of them, right? So, like, I love when the project managers are passionate about project management and they want to talk about project management with other folks in the organization. I love that. To me, that's a right person, right seat. If there are folks that like doing documentation, and I have a project that comes up that I know they're going to need a ton of documentation, I'm going to assign it to that person. And it really does come down to communication, and it's finding folks from within the industry can be really, really helpful, because they can relate better to the customers. If they've been behind a front desk, what it's like to have to stand in front of a guest and be able to say, I'm sorry, I don't have that information about you. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Like, that helps build that empathy, which really does help us provide better service. It's all, and I mean, everybody talks about like this, it's hard to find people, and it's not, I don't, hold on 1 second. So I'm sorry.
No problem. Please take your time. Hey folks, just a reminder that we take up the Q&A as we go through the session. I'm just trying to cover the topics one by one, and then we'll tie them in nicely. And when there's a relevant topic that we're discussing about, then I'll ask the questions.
I'm sorry about that. Our neighbors just dropped a tree right next to our house and didn't tell us that that was happening today. So there was just like a very, sorry, little crash. Got a little nervous. Yes, sorry about that. We were talking about right person, right seat, but I think I covered the answer, right? It's communication, talking to your team, ensuring that they are happy with what they're doing. If they're not happy with what they're doing, trying to find the way to make them happy in that thing that they're doing. Maybe the position is, maybe they're very interested in development. We have somebody that is in our support organization that has gotten their like certifications over the past couple of years, and they are transitioning to join part of our development organization. So we think that is I think that's great. I love that. I love that this person was able to leverage their skills in one area to then, grow their career into another. I think that's great. And I think that ultimately like I said, it's about communication, and it's not always easy. But that transparent communication is pretty critical.
And so I have a follow-up question to this, which is there are evolving client expectations. Each implementation project is different from the last one. And so how do you keep track of the requirements from each of these implementation projects and then the resource that is allocated to the specific requirements? How different is it from, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the last part of the question is how different are these? Are they not very different? Like, are the requirements usually somewhere around the same, or are they very different that you need to shuffle your resources? And how do you do it?
Okay, so from implementation to implementation, things are different, right? Yep, got that. And then you said, how do we keep track of changes and things like that? And then you also asked about how that affects the team and resourcing. Okay, so generally speaking, we have, like, I've talked a lot about like our CRM, that aspect of the business, because that is the one that CRM implementations for a small brand, it's a very big lift. We partner with them for a long time. Our enterprise lifts tend to be more for bigger clients. They have more systems and more resources. So as much as we want to say like it's bigger or easier, like in the end, requirements, plans, communications, it all ends up being the same. So from project to project or iteration to iteration, how do we track those requirements? We always go back and review the scope. We always go back and say, like, simply to every hotel, what's changed since we last spoke? Have you implemented some new system? Have you found success using something else? Like, it's always that first conversation. What's changed since the last time we've talked? Sometimes they may have, any number of things can change, especially in hotel land. So that's always the first question. What's changed? Who are your new key players? What is your, what's your feeling in the organization about this new thing that we're going to do, right? And then how we track those requirements. There's a couple different systems for us, because we are a hybrid shop, right? We've got development and implementations. The development shop is in Jira. We talked about that. The rest of the implementations and delivery organization is now into the new system. We still will use Confluence, right? So we'll still use Confluence for our long-term knowledge base. So when we track requirements and things like that, the dev organization always tracks and provides their release notes and things like that into Confluence, where then the implementation organization is bringing those requirements, those steps, to turn them into checklists, and we put them in our new system. And then that turns into subtasks and things like that within the project plan. That's probably one of the coolest features of the new system, is the ability to create the checklist within the system and then have them repeat, so we can provide consistent deliverability. Consistency is lovely. So tracking those kinds of things, just simple version tracking, right? That's easy enough. But like I said, we do use Confluence for that, for our knowledge base. The hardest part there is reminding people that the knowledge base does exist, right? Like, did you check Confluence? Like, it's like, I understand that, like, our first question is always like, just ask because it's easier, but like, we have to remember that everybody's got a lot on their plates. So reminding and encouraging folks to, did you check Confluence first? Okay, check Confluence and then let me know if you find anything, right? We did release 16 integrations in the span of just a few months. So Confluence, a little bit behind. So it's a little bit, that's been a little bit of a challenge for us recently, but it's like we're working on. Everybody understands that we're working on it. So when we're kind of working on the fly like that, which nobody loves, but we have to, right? We then we do a lot of knowledge sharing via Slack until like the documentation can be formalized and things like that. So we'll share nuggets. Like, I learned something about an integration last night, and I knowledge share with the team in the chat, so everybody knows what's going on. So until the team can catch up on the documentation. So that would be how we would track. And then if we're in project, right, and there's like a change of scope, we do a change order, like just like everybody else. We have I'm really excited. Again, I mentioned the new system multiple times, but we are in the process of, like, the change order process can be just a bear. So we're really looking forward to the new system. We can leverage quite a bit more automation there and an approval process. So that will help us because we're small, right? So we have many customers. They are very often making changes. They buy new things. They are like, they start to see value, and we wonder if we could, right? That becomes a question. We wonder if we could do this thing. We love that question because we love to help people do that thing. And so it becomes like, it's a lot of volume because the project team will set up all the work. We'll like get the baseline stuff, but then we do depend a lot on our technical resources. So it becomes a lot for them. So the project managers end up having to follow up with them. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot for a little team. So we're looking forward to bringing those like levels of automation that we didn't previously have into the mix. And then, communicating that within the team. It's the same thing as I said earlier, just using the tools that we do have, making sure that the folks within the organization know that we're that we're updating the checklist. I'm pretty sure I can add an automation to when somebody does make a change to a checklist, that it can send a notification to the team. So that I need to remember to add that to my to-do list. Thanks for adding to my to-do list, Usha. I'm really, really, really happy about that.
No problem. I'm just glad that you remembered, and that there's so much that you brought out in this conversation. I'm sure everybody agrees, but I'm also glad that you remembered a task in your to-do list. But yeah, so we have a question before we move on to scope. I wanted to move on to scope just to tie it in, and then before that, I want to take this question. So Erin asks, as a client ops consultant on my team, I have trouble getting my sales reps to view me as a sales tool to be used during the sales process, and find that they have limited view that I am onboarding support post contract signed. Is there anything I can do that will get the sales rep to see me more as a sales tool?
I love that question. As somebody who has spent their entire career in ops, I feel this, right? There's always a rub between sales and operations, right? Sales wants to close the deal, keeps the doors open and paychecks paid, right? It's important. Operations wants to deliver the product, like we want to do a good job. There's always like questions between, right? So as a client ops consultant, I would first ask just like a slight, like, is there like, if you're the client ops, is there like a organizationally, where you fall in that structure. So if there is, like, if you report to somebody and that person is, would talk to the salesperson, I would definitely first and foremost, like, raise your flag to your leadership in that within your own team to be like, it is silly that those people are not talking to us during the sales process. Absolutely bonkers crazy, right? Like, you guys have so much knowledge that you learn throughout the process, and the ops team will be the ones that see the trends that we are missing this question consistently. We're not asking this question, and it takes time down the road. Please ask this question up front. So I would say, like, depending on where you are in the organization, I would raise that flag. If you are the leader of the organization, I think that is definitely something that you should be talking with the sales leader about, to say simply, like, this is a gap, and you're missing out. Because when you bring ops into sales, like, you don't have to be in every pitch meeting or anything like that. That's not it. But when you bring an ops person into a pitch meeting, we listen and we hear what the clients are talking about. We start to build that understanding of what the project is, and maybe they haven't signed it yet. And that's great, even better, right? Because then you can go back to the team after the call. Like, maybe you don't feel comfortable, like, speaking up in that meeting, totally fine again. But after that call, you have that, like, background that you can send that message to say, on the call, I heard these 5 things. I would say you should do these 5 things with that, like, for that customer, or ask those 5 questions, right? Sometimes it's a matter of, if you have supportive leadership, of course, or if you are the leader, sometimes you have to kind of just insert yourself into the conversation. And that doesn't always feel like it's hard to, like, as a human, like, that feeling of, like, hey, I see this, it can be really hard, but sometimes you have to start offering ideas in order for folks to see you as somebody that has ideas to offer. So you have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit, to be, and it's hard, right? Like, none of that's easy. I can say it all day long, but it's still very hard for me to, like, sometimes step out of my shell to offer those suggestions. And then the other item that I might suggest is, it doesn't hurt to include your sales team in your project, like your client ops updates and things like that, so they can see the work that you're doing. A lot of times the sales organization can sometimes feel somewhat separate from the rest of the team, right? Because they're a lot of times they're very external. So including your sales team as part of your updates can be really helpful, because chances are you've got all kinds of nuggets of information within your project update anyway, that would be beneficial to them in the long run.
Hey, Ren, I hope that answers your question. But if it does not, please feel free to add another question.
Mhm.
Do you want to take one more question, Jen, before we move on to scope? Yeah. So Emily asks, any advice on how to establish better feedback loop or partnerships with the product team and onboarding teams who are in the field and can identify product workflow problems?
So, okay, any advice on how to establish better feedback? Okay, so this is fun, because I literally am working with my counterpart in the product team, like, right now, to improve that process between product and onboarding. Knowledge transfer, right? Like, that ultimately, it's like knowledge transfer. For us, it's, how is this thing supposed to work? What are the steps we're supposed to do? What's the expected outcome? That, like, knowledge transfer. And so we're working on that right now, and we're working on that other piece back, right? So as our team members are implementing the system, we work really hard. We are not always successful. Like, let's be real about, like, time and space and all of those kinds of things. But we try really hard to ask in our one-on-ones or in our team meetings for that kind of feedback. And it's a matter of making it habit. So if you are seeing trends as the project manager, if you're seeing trends where you're seeing delays, right? Like, you as a project manager in your organization your organization should empower you to raise that red flag, to say, we are seeing this consistent delay in delivery on this one thing. Clearly, we're like, something is missing. If you're out in the field and you are consistently seeing where this, it's always something missing. Doesn't matter. I'm missing license code. I'm missing this, like something's always missing. That is, again, like, I hope that folks are able to work in companies that give them that voice to say, this thing is wrong, and establishing that pattern of asking the questions. Like, you have to ask the questions and consistently ask the questions. I think there's something like people have to be asked something like 7 times for it to be committed to memory or habit or things like that. But as Emily needs to ask that question of her team regularly as part of her day, as part of her conversation. When she's getting your project updates, if you don't have questions about what kind of feedback, like what can we do to improve this overall process, if you don't have that on your project reports, you should, because then you're opening that chain of communication. You have to ask, and then you have to sit and just listen. That's sometimes really hard too, because a lot of times if we know that maybe there was a thing that we've already changed, like, you have to give people the space to listen. Otherwise they will stop offering. So it's a habit change and a culture change. And one, of course, like, I try really hard, but I'm not always successful at it, but it's something that we talk about regularly. So yeah, it's asking, and then write it down. And the last thing I'll say in that is, when you do get feedback, make sure the person that gave you that feedback knows you did something with it, that you took that feedback to the product owner and you follow back up with them, right? Because then you're closing the loop. You are showing them that their time is valued, right? Like, all of us have a limited amount of time. So by actioning that and communicating back to them, say, hey, I talked to my boss about this and they gave me these ideas, but I wanted to let you know that I did share that with you. So you can't always leverage automation for that. Like, sometimes these kinds of things need like the human element. And I think that is like the one way that I found that we've been able to find some success in that kind of thing.
Great answers, Jen. The common denominator that I saw with both of your answers is that put yourself in places where it's going to be uncomfortable, but put yourself in those places and still ask the questions. And great insight on closing the feedback loop, right? Like, even when I do something, I want people to acknowledge that, or like, I want to acknowledge that they've given me feedback and I put it somewhere. So it really shows that you care. Again, next, moving on to scope of projects. I would call scope the holy grail, but so tell us a little bit about the definition, or how you define scope, and how you communicate scope, and how you make sure that it's harmoniously executed or taken up over the course of the project.
I'm not going to lie, scope is the hardest part, right? And I think that, like, as a project manager, we always think scope is part of delivery, but scope starts in sales, right? The sales team has to do more than just have a conversation. They have to write things down. That's why, like I said, we're bringing in the technical account managers so we can increase the communications regarding like some of the system things and things like that, which can sometimes surprise us later. We have and are in the process at Hapi of like refining what our initial implementation is, because we joke, like, people talk about Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud and they're like, oh, you can do a million things with it. You can do a million things with those systems, right? Like, it is endless. But when it comes to implementing those systems, you have to find a sense of completion. You have to find that way to getting silly, but like you have to bring that value to the customer. So to your point, it does start with scope, and making sure that we include the scope as part of our contracts, right? We also have a document that we've created that is our like high level detail, and it's growing and it changes every day because we add a new integration, or we see like we really should do this differently. Let's so we are iterating, but having that high level of detail is very important. And one of the ways that we have worked to improve that process is, like I said earlier, we brought the ops team into that conversation earlier to start reviewing the scope and asking questions within the document. We do have a handoff process between sales and implementation where we review the scope, like we talk through the scope, we make sure we understand the expectations of the hotelier. And we refer, as project managers, they refer to the scope all the time. And we always, like, I think every project manager will probably have that same feeling of like, well, the first thing we say to the hotel, well, that's not in scope, right? Like it's not in scope. Like we're always reminding people of what is and in and out of scope. And it's like, it's the worst because you feel like you're the nanny and you're like always chasing people to be like, we have to stay in scope and delivery. So one of the things that I am hoping by putting together like our implementation, like our initial delivery, is that as part of that process, I have a list of things that my team can say, look, if we're on time, target, budget, our hours, like we're doing good, this is the list of things that are like the add-ons, like the easy things that you can say yes to build some social credit with your customer, because that's always important. And then it also gives them that feeling of like, hey, I really am getting value out of this. But that starts with having a well-defined scope. Because like every project manager, if the scope isn't well defined, then you're not set up for success in the long run. How do you define that scope? You define that scope by asking a million questions and driving your sales team nuts. It doesn't change. Repeatable processes make it easier. Having technical people in sales calls makes it easier because then you're having that conversation. But until you really get to the like well-defined, what is our product, what is our process, it's really easy for folks to struggle with putting together a well-defined scope. Like it is a give and take kind of thing. And scope really should, like I said, like your scope of work and your SOW, that should be defined as part of sales before it comes to implementations. The implementations team should just be setting up a project plan that is reflective of that scope. And I don't put a lot of stock in a lot of other like extraneous documentation for documentation's sake. So as long as the project plan is reflecting what's supposed to be delivered and it includes a timeline and who's responsible for delivering things, I don't do a lot of the extra communication plan or risk register. Like I don't see a lot of value there. I mean, we kind of all know what is going to go wrong, right?
So I have a follow-up question for scope. So is that in which leg of this process do you define project KPIs? Or is it after you have scoped out everything? Is it before that, or do they keep evolving over time?
So we want to know, like from our definition of success is our customer's definition of success. So it is important to me, what I care about is that my team was able to deliver what the project and what the client was sold. Making sure that what they were sold and what they think they were sold, sometimes those are different things. So working to always have that alignment, and that, like I said, that does start in sales. It doesn't, if there's not a well-defined scope and the contract is signed, we're all going to have a really bad time of things, because then that means that your expectations are not well-defined. You don't really know what the customer is expecting. So then you end up spending, instead of being able to like jump right in and have your project kickoff meeting and be like, hey guys, I need these deliverables. And once you get this to me, then we can start rolling. You are basically back to square one, because they will have had, who knows, like months of conversation with the sales team, right? Because some of these products are Salesforce is it's a big lift, and it is a big capital expense for folks. So they've had to budget for it for probably a year to be able to like make sure that's included in their next year's budget. So they've been thinking about it for a really long time. And if the scope isn't well defined as part of the contract, they come to us and they're like, we bought this thing. Now what? I don't know anything about you. It's not written down. So it is part of that process for sales. Like I said, you make it easier by having a well-defined product first. So then your sales team is like, oh, I know what I'm selling. I know where it's going to meet the customer's needs, and those kinds of things.
And so what does first value mean to you? When does the customer, is that something that you track, or
so first value it can mean a lot of different things because we have a lot of different products. The reality is that when a hotelier is able, like when we're able to make the connections of the systems, they're able to get in and start using the system. But even before that, like we sell a product that is an app in the Sales Cloud existence, right? Sales Cloud is way like so much more than just our little app. So arguably a hotelier could, once they get their license from Sales Cloud, they could, if they wanted to, they have access, they can jump in and they can start setting things up. We don't want them to necessarily, because we want to make sure that like the app is set up correctly and they're not like inadvertently like creating like competitive objects or using our custom objects for some other thing. So that kind of stuff is one thing that we do, but that is technically first value. Like their ability to utilize the system is technically first value. What I view as, we were talking about this earlier today, like what is live in our environment, right? Because we're making a connection from a PMS to Sales Cloud. Now they have data in Sales Cloud and they can start learning about their guests. They can start their profiles start to become real. You can start to talk about preferences and things like that. Like all of that is there, and they can start using the system. But until they have their emails set up and they're we're starting to send transactional emails, that it is live or it's not live. It's kind of a gray area. I believe, and the vast majority of our projects are implementing Sales and Marketing Cloud and being able to turn off and existing systems. So that moment is what I consider live, that we've turned off the existing systems and we're solely using the new system. And that is what I would consider final value.
Got it. And this is a relevant question, but it's not related to the domain, which is when we're talking about scope. I was also thinking there might be a lot of times when a lot of implementation managers or people in service delivery or value delivery should say no, right? What is your top advice for saying no? How do you do it, and what has worked for you?
I hate saying no. I hate saying no. I don't want to say no to my customer. But inevitably you have to say no, right? So maybe I'm ridiculous, but when I get a new customer, the first that we immediately start to build that relationship, and you want to build the social credit. I know early on the things that are going to be asked, just from years of experience, like the early on things, chances are things that are not going to really impact the overall scope too much. Maybe they want a little bit more training. Maybe they want another template. Like you can kind of, once you know your team and your product and your service, you can kind of gauge that just from experience. So I might say yes a couple times because I know I'm going to have to say no later, right? Like you want to build that social credit. And when I do have to say no, there's probably like an argument that you should, like, there's like all different schools of thought on, I like to call it as like the compliment sandwich, like the cookie, right? You say something good, like, hey, we're super excited about all the work that we're doing. Everything's going great. But we have this problem and we're really sorry. But this other thing that we're going to do, we're going to give you, it's like kind of like sandwich it in the middle. And it's not that I'm hiding it, it's that I am trying to present it in a way that is more palatable. And so I kind of use that as like almost like an icebreaker to the issue. And then I will get into more of then I'll say, okay, now that we know this is what our action plan is, like the second paragraph is, and this is why we can't do this thing. Like, then I will go into the detail, but I want to try to start the conversation in a positive way if I can. You can't always, right? Like sometimes it's just no. And I'm sorry. But even then I always start with I try to use, I don't use harsh language. I try to use softer language to build, again, try to imply that I'm coming from a place of empathy because I'm a customer advocate. The project managers are customer advocates. They want to do and provide good service to our customers. So we try to use soft language for empathy. And we also try to avoid absolutes as much as possible. We never do that. There's always an exception. So we try to avoid those kinds of language.
Understood. It's a great sentence, really. Make the no's more palatable, and the way you do it is no harsh language and no absolute terms. Great. So we've talked about scope. We've talked about streamlining process, and the last leg of this I want to talk about is the importance of scalable documentation and training. Can you shed some light on how teams at Happy do it? What are some best practices around this?
So this is something we struggle, again, small team, we struggle with this, right? And like I said earlier, we release an absurd amount of functionality and new integrations. So scalable documentation, I guess, in terms of, I think about it if you're, and I'm looking back at my notes that I wrote about this because I felt pretty good about it, but ultimately, if you never write anything down, you're not helping anybody, and you're especially not helping yourself, right? So when we talk about we talked about it earlier, our knowledge base, go check with, check in Confluence. We do, you do the little things that you can, right? You create templates that are reusable. You create your knowledge base. So you try to centralize things. Sometimes documentation does need to live somewhere else, but having as simple as a customer's profile or a vendor's profile with links out to the other place, great, that's fine. I know I just need to go to that one customer's website. With some of our other documentation, we have to customize a little bit. So again, we use templates and things like that. We do have an e-learning portal that we maintain for our hoteliers that's customer facing. In a perfect world, the product owners get great requirements from the customers, which lead them to writing amazing user stories. And the developers are able to follow and deliver and say, this is how I did the thing. And that is a perfect world. And I wish that perfect world existed every day. But that, the product owners come back, they write the release notes, they share that with the implementation team. We write, and we have a few folks on our team that really enjoy writing documentation. And so we have, we have a common voice that we use common language, and we try to prioritize the documentation. It's more important that we have good documentation about setting up a journey in Marketing Cloud that's easy to find and scalable than it is that we have documentation on some other some other small thing that only has been done this one time or is in pilot phase, right? If it's still in pilot, but I've got something in production, we try to prioritize the thing that's going to be in production. Our teams work really hard to find that balance, and it's sometimes impossible. But what we are doing now is, as we are implementing the new system, we're getting the requirements in, and we're going almost right to the system. So we start building that checklist within the system. So then we'll get to the knowledge base, but in that moment, sometimes we have to empower our teams first, and they need the checklist and the steps and the things to deliver. So scalable, I don't really know that there is such a thing as scalable. I'm happy to be wrong, love to learn more about it. But I think it's about process and consistency and voice and tone, and folks knowing where to go to find the information when they want to. And then training materials, to me, documentation and training materials are synonymous, right? Like, we really write documentation that can be used to set up the system, which is training.
Understood. Jen, I just want to remind you that we're running a little bit over time. If you want, we can end the session now. We have a bunch of questions that might take about 10 minutes. Is it okay that we take them, or?
Give me 1 second and look at I gave myself a little bit of extra time after this in case, because I told you I was really nervous. I was like, I might need a minute to calm down. So whatever questions that folks have.
Yeah, before that, I'm sorry we're taking up your
It's my fault. I talk a lot. It's fine.
Yeah, so as a follow-up question to this, we have a question in the Q&A that asks you basically that if you're sending clients videos and help articles, but you end up walking through everything with the client, the resources don't seem to be used, but you're running a lean implementation team, what has worked best for you in situations like that? And
So,
here you go.
Yeah, no, I feel that in my bones. Again, I think I said something earlier where I was like, oh, the client ops team, I feel this. We are all creatures of habit. So it's about establishing from the very beginning that we have this tool. Please refer back to it. And it is, unfortunately, it's about creating that habit, and that making sure that they know that they can go to these places. They don't have to come to me. Make sure that they know that they can go to those places. And then if you are sending the articles and you're like, hey, go do this thing, and you're finding yourself back on the phone with them, there's two things that are happening. One, they're just not maybe they just aren't, and they really just want to talk to a human. So I would say that in that case, some folks just don't. We're all, it's the right way to say, we all learn in different ways. Some people really just need to be coached. And if you have somebody that you run into throughout the process that you just need to coach them, then I would make accommodations for that in your overall project plan to have more training sessions that are in person. So you could do that. There's probably an upsell opportunity there for you too, if you don't have a ton of time in your contract for those kinds of things. Another aspect of it is maybe your documentation isn't great. Maybe it's not covering the relevant topics. Maybe it's written in a way that is overly technical and makes it difficult for folks to understand. So you may want to consider even something as simple as formatting can make a big difference. We like to do things in bite-sized pieces. You do a little bit here and right. You take it in small chunks. I think that can be really helpful. And if you are, and again, and we know this, we do this all the time. So part of our new tool that we're implementing, we try to add articles for every single task that we are giving to our partner. So we're like, hey, you can do this thing, and here's this article, here's this, do this. We need you to give us these 10 things. And if you don't know where to go to get these 10 things, you really probably do. But here's this article that you can go look at, and it'll talk you through all the different ways to get this information from a system. We do sometimes run into that trouble. And I think the other side of it, as the project manager or the team member that's constantly doing this thing, it can wear you out. I'm not saying that it isn't frustrating. It is for sure frustrating. And like I said, we talked about it earlier, you got 7 times is that magic number. And you can start to do the thing where when you're doing your regular check-in calls, you're going to that knowledge base and saying, hey, I want to talk about this thing. And you use the tool with the customer to demonstrate that behavior. That can also be really helpful. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, make it a joke for yourself. Like try to turn that negative feeling into something like an inside joke for yourself. Like of course, like you got to kind of just do that. Like the human part of us, right? You got to feed that part too. I think that got that one. I hope.
Yes. Ejel, if that answers your question, please let us know. If it does not, please ask anything else that you might want to in the Q&A. But great approach or perspective, I would say, Jen, about being optimistic or making something a joke for yourself. I think it helps you get through things. So the other questions that I had for you, I want to tie them all up into one question and just ask you about if so a lot of lean implementation teams or even the leaders of lean implementation teams that I've come across in the community talk about tooling and how important it is for them to select the right tool. And if they don't have a tool, they usually are on sheets, they're on Excel, their information is siloed, and most often than not, I see that they prefer it that way. Is it, I want to ask you, do they prefer it that way, or what is the block? What is stopping them from uh, going all out, or like say rallying for a tool, or say asking for a better way to do things?
So I think you and I, when we like first chatted, we talked about that. Like, I am a nerd for efficiency. I really, really want my team to work as little as possible. I mean, like hard work, right? Like I want them to work as little as possible to deliver the best product. So I want them to have what they need. And it's not easy. And depending on where a company is in their overall journey of being a company, right? Like they may or may not have the financial resources to buy something really cool. But I have there's like a couple schools of thought on that. From my perspective, I think that it is so much more, and like again, we are in the thick of making some really big transitions of our team. So if any of my team has joined, they're probably like, yes, but you're not moving fast. Like I'm sure they have like some feel like they will say like, this is what we're doing, and it does kind of it's hard at first, right? So like bringing those changes to an organization, we are currently moving from one system to another. Everybody, and this is since I've joined the company, it's probably like the third big change I've made, because I joined and we were using one system and everybody was in different places. And so there's this idea like we can't afford to buy this thing right now. Yet project manager is going to from system A to system B and trying to link things together. And then they're going to system C to have something that they can communicate out to the customer. And I believe in my like heart of hearts that you will spend so much more money with that inefficiency and the human frustration that it causes, because people get frustrated and they leave jobs. They leave because they don't have the right tools and they feel like they're spinning their wheels all the time. Like that is a reason that people leave companies, and then you have to rehire, right? So like spending the money on the tool, and again, we're like in the thick of spending that money on the tool, I think can make a huge difference. But then you have to get people to adopt and like get comfortable with the tool, and it can be very challenging, especially if it's a tool that like operates differently on a core level than maybe something else did that they were used to using previously. So the our small team, having everybody in the same place is critical. We weren't before. We're in there now, and we're working to improve the integrations with the external teams, like our dev team. I don't know how there's like two systems that dev teams use, right? They use Jira, they use like Azure DevOps. We're a Jira house. And so like that integration between Jira and our new system is really, really important. And we're working on that now. There's some like core functionality that's pretty cool, works pretty good. And so it is about efficiency. And like, how did I convince my leadership that we should spend this money? I think is also like a question that people will often have. The long answer and the short answer is like, I asked a lot. Like I asked a lot and often, and I kept bringing different examples of ways that we were not being successful. Or, you know, like I was in my one-on-one with my team member and they were like, I went here, 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 and here, and I couldn't find the thing that I needed. And now like my team member is very stressed out. And I don't like that for my team. I want my team, and we're imperfect and we're not always harmonious, but I really want my team to be happy and well served. So it was that like that keep at it. Like I'm an SVP now, but I wasn't when I started this journey to find something better. And it was showing up with data. Like I knew that I knew how much time I was spending. Start talking to my team. How much time are you spending on this, that, the other? Like, where are you finding your day go, right? Like your day can get lost really fast in a Google spreadsheet trying to make formulas work. And I know that like Google has some like cool little features that you can do now, but not all of them do exactly what you need. Like so many things get like really, really close, but it's that little gap in between that is miserable. Whatever that gap is, it's miserable. And so having that, have your internal tools, because Jira is like our internal dev shop tool, we don't want to share that with the customer because like that's our IP, right? So we don't want to do those kinds of things. So like there's always some other step. So we tried doing like endless workarounds, different systems, different tries. Like we were using Google Sites for a while because you can set up a pretty decent little portal for a customer, but it's time consuming and you still have to create a million Google Sheets and things like that. And we still we're implementing a new system. So it's like, we have to rebuild everything that we had in Google Sheets because you just have to. Sometimes you just have to redo that kind of stuff. You have to make that investment. But I know it'll make a difference in my team when we're fully on board. They will be able to sit down at their desk and see when they log into the system, the 10 things that they need to do that day. My leadership, the leaders within my team will be able to look and see what their team members are doing that day. And then it becomes a sales tool. People never talk about it that way. But if you think about it, if you have your resources well planned out, your team is allocated, your project tasks are happening, your sales team can then say, hey, how long does it take you to actually do this thing, right? So we know how long it takes us to do that thing. They can adjust their quotes accordingly. And then also you can answer that lovely question that everybody wants. When can I have this thing, right? When? That's the project manager's life is when can I have this thing? I couldn't answer that before. And I'm a little bit closer now. I'm still not fully implemented, but I'm a little bit closer to being able to answer that question more consistently. And that is also really important to the team.
Understood. Great insights on how you can get leadership, or how you can convince someone that hey, this tool is important. And but it also is that people don't usually see the benefits of a tool until it's implemented. Say you're using a different tool now, you're setting up the system, and then you know that these are going to be the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Other than asking a lot, do you have any more advice on how do you make people see the benefits? What was your turning point where you said, hey, this is enough? Like, I'm not doing Google Sheets, I'm not doing Excel. This is enough. Like, what was one time, or what was that one point where you thought, yes, it's time now? Taking out all the variables, of course, about growth, where the company is, how fast you're growing, but taking out all that, is there anything else?
So I got tired. Like it's such a like a simple thing to say, but I got really tired. I got tired of my team coming to me and saying, when can I do this thing? How long is it going to be? What's happening in my, like, I can't, I can't, like, everybody was so, like, we're so frustrated because we can't deliver exactly the way that we want to, right? Like, I have some absolutely amazing project managers, and they all have like great experience, and they have like a vision of what they want to deliver. I have incredibly talented consultants that have a vision of what they want to deliver. And when you just, like, you're being asked and asked, and you can't, I can't tell you this thing, it's exhausting. And so I got really frustrated. As previous to the new system, I got really frustrated a couple months, it was probably over a year ago now. I got really frustrated one day, and I was like, you know what, like, I can't answer basic questions about you can't do project math in Google Sheets. It doesn't work, right? Like, it just doesn't. So I got really frustrated one day, and I was like, you know what, I am just going to buy this thing. And I just made the choice myself. It was a different system, not the system we're implementing now. It was just Smartsheets. Like, I just bought a subscription to Smartsheets on my own and gave it to my team. I was like, we're just going to do this thing so we can start seeing where our dependencies are. You can't do it. I tried a million different stupid plugins for Jira. Like, no, like, there's a million plugins for Jira. None of them do exactly what I needed it to. And maybe I'm like overly picky. Maybe I have like what I want is not there, whatever the case may be. We tried like all the different free options, every free thing you could, I've done it. And so I got frustrated, and I bought a subscription for Smartsheets, and that allowed the team to start having something. They could start answering those questions of when. What we didn't like is that the customer, like the client facing aspect of it's not great. You can't really hide stuff from them. Not that I want to hide stuff, but like, the customer doesn't need to know all 27 steps to set up Sales Cloud, right? Like, they don't need to know that. They just need to know that we set it up, and that's what they care about. And it's really difficult to like kind of have that more like curated viewpoint for the customers. And so that's it. Like, I got frustrated, and I just did a thing. And is that the right answer? Probably not, but that was my experience. So I did the thing. I started providing good data, and I said, you know, I can't do this in any other system. This thing doesn't have any resource management, so I really can't do it there either, but I can at least do project math, and I can at least tell somebody when a thing is going to be due. Like, I can at least do that part. And then it became it became a lot easier to have like that. But do you see this other stuff? Like, it got easier to have that, like, the rest of the conversation. And then I did a lot of research, and I stumbled on the system, and functionality and price point are very much in line with where we're at and what we were hoping for. So,
understood. Yeah. I think that's all we have for you today, folks. I know we are way over time. We are 23 minutes over time, but thank you so much, Jen, for doing this with us. I have so many other questions that I want to ask you, but maybe in a subsequent conversation some other time. Jen is really busy, but she's made the time for us today, and I'm really glad that we had this. For those of you who are still there, I have a short survey, and I'm going to publish it, and then you can, if you have a minute, please go and answer the survey. But again, thank you so much for your insights, Jen. Everything from people, the process, streamlining implementations, to talking about scaling documentation and speaking out the truth. I really appreciate all of your insights. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
thank you guys for having me. It was fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.